Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 160. I'm delighted to be joined today by the physical performance coach at Nottingham Forest Women, Marcus Ward. Marcus, how are we doing?
Good, thank you, Ben. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, mate. Thank you for coming on. I know we've had a few chats recently about a few different things, and we probably should have recorded the chat we've had just before the podcast, which led to a lot of different topics. But hopefully we'll try and cover a little bit of it when we get going in a second. But Marcus, kick us off. Give a little bit of background about yourself, mate. Where have you been? What have you been up to?
Sure. So originally from down south near Oxford, Reading, but the last 6 years it's all been in the East Midlands. 2015 started sports science degree at Nottingham Trent University, and then it was between the second and third year of that, had a year out working with the Forest men's first team, just a sports science internship. Fantastic experience of that, and then completed third year after that experience, and whilst coming towards the end of that third year, started working with the Forest women's team, which all came about from actually meeting a couple of coaches at a Football Fitness Federation networking events. And then once I'd done the undergrad, went to Loughborough for a master's. At Loughborough University, did exercise physiology there. Continued working with the women, and then what's it been now? But so come up to a year, picked up some work with the girls teams as well. So I've been doing that too. And obviously it's all been a bit curtailed the last 18 months or so with COVID and such. So we haven't actually completed a couple of the last 2 seasons, but yeah, that's where it's been at the moment.
Brilliant, mate. And like you said, you've been to a fair few of our events actually now. But without me just pushing the events and talking about them myself, I wanted to chat with you about how you've utilised, because you're a member of our online community, but how you've utilised the Football Fitness Federation network and the other members as well. So have you got some examples of some things that you've maybe utilized in terms of discussions and sort of links with other members?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's just having that group of people, certainly like in the WhatsApp group, is really, really useful. Obviously the conversations that go off from that, but also being able to sort of, if you know someone's raised a topic and you want to message them directly, that's a really useful way just to get some advice of them. The sort of the webinars and stuff on the network, on the website, again, like especially when I remember, as I said, it was about a year ago when I started working with the girls teams. It was the first time I'd really done work with youth athletes. So being able to watch some of those webinars as part of the general prep, and then 1 or 2 members as well, being able to contact them and say, oh, I'm just about to start this, got any advice? And it was mainly through the networking events that I knew of them. So it was a bit of like an introduction, a bit of a way in to start speaking to them. But yeah, it's just I think just a valuable resource, that opportunity to be able to just reach out to people like that. And instead the conversations that can come off in the WhatsApp group, just learning things from different people, because everyone's got different experiences, haven't they? They all got different perspectives on things which wouldn't otherwise necessarily think about. But yeah, there's loads you can learn from the group, the webinars, and obviously, well, having mentioned the meetings, they're just fantastic resources all around as well.
Brilliant. And then what about networking in general? Because I know when we've had a chat before, you've put yourself out there. You've reached out to coaches. You've created a network of coaches, and also never been sort of afraid to reach out to people and get people's viewpoints on things. So I know you've got some cool little stories about some people that you've reached out to and stuff. So it'd be good to sort of tap into your way of thinking about networking and how that has helped what you do as well.
Yeah. So back in February early this year, I was like in the middle of the third lockdown, when you go on LinkedIn, you can have hundreds of connections and such, but never really often talk to them. It sort of irritates me in a way slightly. So I actually put a post out on LinkedIn saying, does anyone actually want to go beyond being just a connection and actually, talk shop or whatever? And got quite a few responses back from people, and ended up having 10, 15, maybe more sort of conversations off the back of that post. People just messaging saying, yeah, I'll be up for that. And yeah, just chatting to people from university students to far more experienced people, like Clive Brewer got in touch and said he wanted to chat, and ended up speaking to him for an hour and 20 minutes or so, which was just incredible. And yeah, it was not really the intention of trying to speak to people like Clive or whatever. It was just see what comes from it, because you never know what who you're gonna speak to, what you find out. You make notes, and they might say one or two things, and think, actually, yeah, that's quite a useful thing to apply in my setting, and obviously, hopefully, give something back to them as well. Yeah, it's the old thing of, you send a message out to someone, the worst that happens is they say no, or they just don't reply. There's no other cost otherwise. So it's just putting yourself out there, isn't it? Just saying, look, I've seen your work or something. Certainly off the back of podcasts, that's often quite a good way, saying, I just heard you on this, you talked about this. I was just wondering what could you go into more detail in it, or anything like that. So podcasts are often a good way to sort of start a conversation as well, I find. But yeah, it's just, I guess, putting yourself out there, and willingness to learn. That's a fantastic way to sort of ask people directly, so what do you think? And so sometimes, yeah, you might get something back where it's like, okay, maybe that's obviously interesting to know, but maybe can't apply it. But sometimes you get those gems where you think, actually, that's a good idea, let's try it. And when you do it in practice, you think, oh, it's brilliant, we'll continue to use that.
The more conversations like that, the better, aren't they? Because it just gets you thinking. And when you're speaking to people like Clive and others as well, one, they're very receptive to a majority of the time if they've got time and all the rest of it. Like, I think people sometimes think they shut themselves away and don't want to communicate, apart from like through webinars and stuff like that. But people have conversations, and it is a case of doing what you've done and reaching out to people. And I think the fact that you can relate to something that they've done previously shows that you've done your bit of research, and you're not just blindly sort of reaching out and dropping the same message to everyone. So I think that's a point as well, isn't it? That trying to think about the person that you're talking to, and then getting into conversations with them. The more conversation you can have like that, the better.
Absolutely, yeah. It's making sure, if you send them a message, making sure it's personal. I guess many people get messages on LinkedIn saying hi, and they just go straight into the message. Where it's sort of just saying, hi, so hope you're well. And I said, make sure it's personal, because I think you're far more likely to get out of that. And it's still a sort of person-to-person interaction, regardless if they're a very high-level coach. It's still a person that you want to try and communicate with. And if you don't come across very well, then yeah, why should they speak to you?
Yeah. And I think a really interesting part of your career so far, Marcus, and I think this is really beneficial to a lot of listeners as well, is we're going to talk about you setting up as a sole trader. So do you want to just go into the reasons behind that, sort of why you did it, and then also the benefits of doing that as well, just so people are aware, because some people might not even know what that even means.
Yeah, so it was, just the summer just gone. So yeah, been with Forest Women now for just 2.5 years, and sort of over time, it's all been voluntary and everything. But was fortunate that sort of the head coach of the team was able to go to the big boss and say, look, is there any sort of money available to get me paid? And they said, right, instead of becoming an employee of the club, it'd make more sense for me to become a sole trader and invoice the club instead, for hours worked at home, obviously, and then training sessions, games, miles driven and such. So it was sort of not planned in the sense of, right, I want to become a sole trader. It was more, right, this is what the club is suggesting, and I don't want to leave the club. And if it's the opportunity to do what I enjoy and be paid for it, then yeah, definitely not going to say no. And it was also quite beneficial timing, in the sense that some of the girls that I work with in the girls teams, they were wanting to do some one-to-one stuff over the summer. So it actually fit in quite nicely in terms of, well, okay, I'm now coming back to kind of sort of, so in terms of things being a bit more organized in terms of invoicing and sort of set prices and everything. It was quite useful timing in that sense as well. But the benefits, it's quite nice. We train in the evenings, so the days are usually free. Obviously to do work at home and prepare for the sessions, do any little bits and pieces, but there is an awful lot of flexibility in that. So during the day, said you can, I guess it depends on how organized we want to be. Like say, right, I'm going to work between these times and then spend an hour or two just doing this, rather than being in an office from 1 hour to 9 to 5 or something, and then right, okay, stop training. Being able to get flexibility, say, right, I'm going to work from here and here, and then right, I might go out for a run, might go for a walk, get back, a little bit more work, have some lunch or something. So the flexibility is quite nice. If unusual, like things that don't happen often, like infrequent events and on, you can go, right, I can set aside time to go and do that. Obviously, maybe do a bit more work in the day previous or something. But the flexibility is quite nice. And yeah, I think the benefits, I guess it's hard to compare to what it'd be like to be an actual employee of the club, but certainly it's quite, I'm enjoying it being it that way. I said certainly the flexibility to, obviously there are roles to do to prepare for training sessions, prepare for matches, but as and when I do them, it's more down to when I want to do them, so to speak. Obviously make sure they're done in time, but as to when they happen, the flexibility in that is quite nice.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting to discuss because I'm sure there's a lot of people that aren't aware that that is an option that you can do. I think the other thing that you mentioned right at the start was approaching the club to see if they've got finance available to set up either a role or income for coaches. And I think that's another important point. I think far too often coaches are sat back waiting for a job advert without actually knowing that clubs, if you approach clubs and get to, like you did, get to work at the club and prove your worth through the work you do, they'll actually, whether it's freeing cash up or whether it's just utilizing cash that's available, they'll do it once they know that what you're going to bring to the program. So I think that's another important point, isn't it? To actually get in there, get working, and then actually approach clubs and put it on them and say, like, is there money available for me to make this into a role for myself, whether it is a sole trader or whether it is being employed by the club?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. Yeah, just started the third full season here, so it's been 2.5 years of, as you said, trying to prove my worth. And it was actually a case of going to the head coach. Look, so post university, we want to go, as once you've left university or once you're trying to find jobs, obviously you want a full-time job. And I was saying to the head coach, look, this is what I want. I am applying elsewhere. I don't want to leave the club because I'm really enjoying it. And I think it was a case of him then saying, okay, well, I think he didn't want me to leave either. So he went to the big chiefs and said, look, is money available? So I think it's definitely a case of proving your worth. And I like to think I've done that. And so, because then it's reward. It's not a case of just suddenly going in and certainly I think the level we're at, and it's not a professional club. You can't just roll in and say, oh, can I get a good wage? It's earning that right, proving your worth, and if you do all those things, you end up getting rewarded. It's just the patience maybe to get to that stage.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to touch on as well, I know you hit a certain career milestone. I think it's a really important one, and a one that we talk about sort of side hustles. We talk about things like that. So do you want to just give a little bit of detail around the milestone?
Yes, that's a milestone. Makes it sound really quite grand.
I think it is. I don't think it's something to downplay at all.
It was just the case of, as I said now, once you leave university or wherever, like you want to try and get into a full-time job in sport, wherever. And until you get to that point, obviously there are side hustle jobs you have to do. So for me, it was just working at a pub part-time to help pay the bills. That I don't want to work in the hospitality area, but I know it's a good way to help earn money, and actually you've learned really good life skills in there as well. Obviously working in a pub, you're dealing with a lot of people, both members of the public, but working in a team as well. And I was fortunate that the pub I worked at, the people there were really good. The landlady was very understanding that I wasn't going to be there forever. I just wanted to help pay my bills. So she was very supportive of that. And when I told her, I was earning enough now from the sports science S&C side of things that I could give up this part-time job. She was very, very supportive. So very fortunate with that. But yeah, it did feel like a good moment when saying, right, I can now just do jobs that I want to do. It felt really good at that time to think, right, this is sort of what I've been working towards. Now all the income I receive, it's from doing things I want to do. I'm not having to do anything because it's going to help my bills. I'm doing it because I want to do it. So it did feel really special when that all happened.
Yeah, I think that's really important to highlight, because we know that there's certain times in your career that you do have to, and we've spoke about this loads of times on the podcast, that people have taken extra jobs and whatever just to get through that period, whether it's going through a master's, whether it's initially stepping into roles that are maybe part-time or voluntary. I know we've had a big discussion on the community this week about voluntary work, whether it needs to be paid, like when you should get paid and all the rest of it, which has been some great input on. But I do think it's a really important thing to highlight, is the fact that you've been able to drop that and focus on what you want to do. But I also wanted to sort of focus on your progression as a practitioner, because we'll go into the programming a little bit at Forest and some of the things you've implemented. But what about you as a practitioner? Where's the biggest sort of progress that you've made you feel over the past, whether we want to go COVID times or beforehand, like there's a lot been going on, but what are some sort of highlights and things that spring out to you?
I guess I've thought that my progression as a practitioner is actually quite well in parallel with the progression as the club as well. So when I first joined, I can still remember the first training session I was there with the women, March 2019. Turned up, met a few of the people, and there's a handful of codes to use for warm-up. So sort of quickly made something up and went about it, which was fine. Sort of part of this, it's the first session, often turn up with loads of questions, end up with, I think, leaving with more questions about how things were. And then, so there was only a couple of months left of that season. So sort of saw that out. Didn't really do anything too extra special other than really just leading warm-ups, sort of getting a feet under the table, and just seeing how things were. Then the club as a whole changed quite a bit over the summer, brought in a full-time head coach. A few new things were introduced, like GPS, obviously, which is quite big for my role. So sort of taking on that was an extra responsibility, and just the extra level of detail that GPS could add to help then inform other things I could do. So if it's more sort of monitoring, extra running sessions, or anything like that, there was that to help inform it. I said, the club as a whole, once those sort of new things came in, everything's just been pushing on since. And then personally, I think just confidence, and I guess that just comes with experience. More doing things, just keep learning from experience, from everything really. The two have gone up together quite well, so it's been quite, I'll say, very fortunate. I think the sort of the timing of everything, from where I've been and where the club's been, and how I've been able to follow in the footsteps. It was a clean slate to start with. So when I came in, there was no previous SC or sports scientist before. It had been previously, but not at the time when I came in. So it was kind of a clean slate, sort of do what you want in a sense. But over time, little things have been added, and as my experience and confidence grew, I've been able to offer more things. Like, I think it was a few months into that first full season, I felt, okay, right, I can probably actually start to give exercise programs for the players at home. Whereas certainly to start off, we wouldn't have felt confident doing so and saying, right, there you go and do this in your own time. And just, lots of little bits like that, which is partly, I think, inspired by, I guess, the environment. So sometimes players might ask some things of you, and you think, okay, we'll do that. And then if you're doing it just as players, then it becomes the whole team. Little bits on nutrition as well. So sort of delve into other areas, because after building up that confidence and experience, you think, okay, right, I can lead on this. I can give the players something that's worthwhile, and I know what I know is saying research back to whatever. So I'm confident that this will do them some good. And this season was a massive one in terms of we now have team gym sessions once a week. So again, for the team, that's massive. Just for a lot of players, it's the first time they've really had proper gym experience. And then individually, I mean, when I had the year out with the men, I was in the gym, sort of led a couple or a few small group sessions, but when it was the big team ones, was there just assisting the S&C coach. So now to be able to sort of lead them myself, that's another big step up in experience and new opportunities, which has been really good for me personally, and I said mainly for the team as well, to benefit from these opportunities. And I think it's also helped actually the stuff they do away from the training. So they have that one session a week. Hopefully it inspires them, right, okay, one session a week is great, but if I can do two, maybe even three, other ones, then that pushes them even further. So yeah, the progression of the club as a whole has been fantastic. I mean, like just a couple of weekends ago, we got to play at the City Ground, the men's ground, and we had nearly 4,500 people come and watch us play Derby County. So I guess it's women's football as a whole. It is obviously building and expanding massively, and both the club, we're sort of riding on that, and I think I'm sort of going up alongside that. So the timing is really really fortunate. Yeah, certainly I think ultimately it all comes from experience. Doing lots of different pieces, not trying to sit still, trying to try new things in the warm-up. Sometimes they work, sometimes it's an absolute car crash. So you think, okay, we're going to do that again. But yeah, experience just, I think, informs everything that you do going forward.
I think the two words you've used there that jump out to me are experience, like building experience, and confidence as well. And I fully agree that they probably come together at similar times in terms of as your experience goes up, your confidence goes up, you tackle challenges, don't you? And when you get out the other side of them, your confidence is increased. But that's a difference with the applied side as well, isn't it? We go through, and again, we spoke about this before we started recording, you go through your degrees, your masters, your qualifications, and all the rest of it. But there's such a difference when you're actually stepping out either onto the grass or into the gym, or you've suddenly got a squad in front of you and you're in charge and you've got to take the session, you've got to inspire. And that's those two words for me what stood out when you were talking then, because they're the things that we have to get some experience. And if people out there are going through qualifications and you're not picking up experience, it's definitely something to be doing, because you're going to get that little step up in confidence and everything that comes with that experience, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely. It's, yeah, university, you don't, unless some courses might offer it, but yeah, it's hard to get that practice of dealing with a group, which is obviously massive in what this role entails. And experience, I think, is really the only way you can deal with that. Like this season, we've had a couple of students come in as interns to help with reserves teams and development teams, and trying obviously to help them. It's quite hard to sometimes explain things. It's just a case of, look, you just got to go and experience it. It's not necessarily I can't sort of teach you it. I think really it's just you got to go and do it. Just almost get thrown at the deep end, which maybe takes a certain. I think maybe you've got to have the confidence first of all to go and say, right, just go in and expect that the first walk you do, whatever, is probably going to be the worst one you do, and it's only going to get better from there. Basically, I have that confidence to just get things rolling in the first place, and it gets easier from there.
I think on that as well, though, what we've got to realize in that situation when it feels uncomfortable and it's not enjoyable, is it? When you take them first few and you overthink about everything that you're doing, you forget how to do any sort of movement, any sort of stretch. But on that, I think what you've got to realize is that everyone's been through that, haven't they? The guys that are at the top level, that are working with the top players, that everyone's been through something similar, a similar sort of situation. And it's how you deal with it. You spoke about some challenges, you spoke about things going wrong. Like everyone's had that at some point. And I think the faster we accept that and move on from it and learn from it, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like anything, isn't it? Sort of the first few times might be really awkward, but as long as you can get through that, it gets a lot easier from there, and you learn. It's the quickest way to learn is experience. So yeah, you just got to get through those first few early stages.
Yeah, 100%. And how is it working with the players? Because they're on a part-time program at Forest, aren't they? So how is it working with players on a part-time basis? How have you found that?
Yeah, it's ultimately it's a case of the message always gives the players is you just got to do what you can in terms of what they can do themselves. So our setup is train Tuesday nights and Thursday nights on the pitch. Wednesday nights we're in the gym as a team, and then games are usually Sunday afternoons. That's the only sort of contact hours with the players. On top of that, you've got some university students who also play for university, and for them, their games are usually Wednesdays, and they might have some other training sessions during the week. So it's just being aware of them. So they might turn up to a session, one of our training sessions, having already trained, which is that sort of information is useful to know. And then some of them also have their own S&C coaches with the university. So again, sort of liaising with them or just speaking to the players, saying, right, what have you done with them? What could I then give you as a sort of supplement to that? And then to some universities, some of them they've got jobs, maybe family. So it's just a case of saying, right, what can we do? We've got those contact hours, the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday evenings. In terms of, say, another workout, have they got their own gym or they got equipment at home? Just contacting, saying, look, what can work? So Mondays and Fridays are the 2 days I'll usually give them, an extra session or a couple of extra sessions to do at home. So say we just play on Sunday, the Monday might just be a bit of uppers and core or something for those who played. Friday, a bit more of maybe a total body session, but obviously we're on Sunday in mind. I think just communication is just the biggest thing. So obviously we only see each other on the evening, so WhatsApp is absolutely huge for what we do. So when it went down last week, that was an absolute nightmare. So yeah, using WhatsApp, just to drop a text saying like, okay, how are you feeling, or what we do. We do use an app called RIPT. I think it stands for Reach Your Potential Trainer. So on that, there's some lifestyle questions on there, some wellness questions like your sleep, soreness, and mood and everything, which we ask the players to fill out every day, which is a good use of, without having to text the player directly how they are. They fill these questions, and if someone, say, is their mood's down or their sleep's down, or they've had a little note with a little injury note or something, then we can follow up on that. It's the same app which we can then also upload the workouts. So again, that makes life easier in terms of, instead of texting a PDF or something, it's just right. Log on the app, go to today, right, workouts there, the exercises and the sets and the reps and everything. Which I think things like that, when you only see them like in the evenings, I think those sorts of resources are valuable when it comes to trying to communicate with the players. Yeah, it's sort of, I have to appreciate obviously that they do have uni and work and such. So when texting them something, not necessarily expecting an instant reply because what's ever on. But I said the main thing was just telling them, just communicate. If I've given them a workout to do in the evening and they've had a long day, maybe feeling a bit tired, I think, okay, probably can't do all of that. Okay, so right after, just let them know, okay, we'll just do the core bit or something. So it has its challenges, but it sort of forces you to communicate well, I think. And ultimately, as I said, it's trying to make sure, get a message across to them. They can only do what they can. But I guess as long as at the end of the season, they can look back and say, how we do, they did everything they could. They took responsibility and did what they could in terms of doing the sessions or whatever, being prepared for games, recovering well. As long as they've done what they can, I think that's all we can ask for, really.
Yeah, I know. I mean, any program comes down to empowering players somewhat, doesn't it? Because they've got to take responsibility for some of the preparation that goes into performance. But from your point of view as well, I suppose it's about managing time, isn't it? And making the most of any time that's available. I know you touched on before that you literally just started with warm-ups, and then I'm guessing creeped in a little bit more time here and there, but then it comes down to them prioritizing, doesn't it? Right, I've got X amount of probably minutes, more like hours available, and how am I going to use them? Like, what are the go-tos? What are the sort of things you feel like are going to give you biggest bang for your buck? So what was your thought process around that? Like initially, maybe when you had the warm-up time, what was your idea around that? Was it literally just taken for a warm-up, or did you think about like, I can maybe sneak a bit of this, that, and the other in, or like, and then also the sort of approach to now to really maximizing time?
I think certainly to start with, it was a case of just getting them ready for the session. The ramp protocol was the sort of main one I followed, so just following that, ultimately, just getting them ready, not thinking about anything too much long term. That was certainly to start with. When then actually began, was it the 1920 season? Come across a paper, or got shown a paper that was a sort of jumping exercise program around helping try to prevent ACL injuries. And all the exercises in there were things like just walking lunges or jumps, hops, which thought, okay, well, that's the sort of things you can do to warm up anyway.
Yeah.
So incorporated that in. And I guess since then, depending on the session, obviously, depending on time, if something's overrun, and actually it's only 10 minutes, then it's a case, right, let's get them ready. Whereas other times, like, okay, right, we've got a bit of time here. What can we work on long term? So things like speed. So that's something I've sort of been doing at the moment, trying to do a bit of acceleration technique. It might only be a few minutes, but it's better. There's nothing. Always try and get a couple of sprints in every week just to get that exposure anyway. But in terms of working on speed, what was quite fortunate actually, the way we do training is the coaches like to start with 10-15 minutes of just doing boxes, just rondos, which sort of takes up part of the warm-up anyway. So it gets them going at least. So it takes away part of what I need to do, which then leaves more time to do things like speed stuff, which is quite convenient. So certainly trying to be aware of okay, there's certainly opportunities here to make things more long-term. Fortunately, getting a coach get a fair bit of time. I think it's about 15 minutes or so if everything's going to time. So yeah, can enable a bit of good work on sprinting technique, or further down the line we'll look at change of direction and things like that. So that's definitely on the pitch. It's a good example of that. And in terms of the conditioning as well, we're quite fortunate. The head coach sort of taken on this idea that's suggested to him about Raymond Verheijen's sort of football periodization stuff. So when it comes to conditioning side of things, sort of using that in terms of set times for the games and everything, not having to worry too much about allowing for sort of isolated running as part of the main session. So in terms of maximizing time, that's been huge. In terms of at least once a week, assuming there's no midweek games, being able to go right. Usually it's our Thursday session. This week we're doing 11v11s or something for 3 sets or 3 rounds of 12-minute games or something like that. One, and then the other week it might be smaller sided games or something. I think sort of certainly observing them, I think that's been a really good sort of stimulus for the players in terms of the conditioning side. Really minimising the amount of isolated running we've had to do to maybe sort of the post-match stuff, and obviously any work the players want to do outside of that, if they're missing a session or something, then obviously we'll give them some running to do. But that's also helped, I think, maximise time. Is obviously they're playing the game, the coach will make 1 or 2 technical or tactical points within it, saying make sure you're following this shape or something, or bear in mind these things, maybe recoveries or something. Otherwise they just go and play the game, and obviously it's at intensity such that becomes a good conditioning stimulus as well. So that's been quite a good thing to come across and to use for us, certainly because of having two 2-hour sessions a week to maximise the time from all the things technical, tactical, obviously, and the physical. I think that's worked really well for us, unfortunately.
That cohesive approach comes down to the strength in your relationship as well, doesn't it? And I know it's something you wanted to touch on in terms of the relationship you've got with the head coach, and I think it's a really important point. But where has that come from? Has that been something that's sort of naturally been developed? Do you think it's been because of a mutual trust and respect from one to another? Where do you feel that that's been built from?
I think it certainly has developed naturally, it feels, and maybe having 1 or 2 sort of mutual interests that have helped me build things on from there. It's getting along really well. I remember there's been a couple of shared car journeys or something. There was some kind of event at St George's Park that we went to. I think it's the England youth teams sort of sharing what they do. So we went along to that. So those sorts of car journeys that we've been on, and you just sort of start chatting, and you get to know each other on a bit more at the personal level as well. So you talk about the job, you talk about football, but the sort of the relationship sort of develops in terms of getting to know each other personally as well. And then from there, obviously, when it comes to things like suggesting sort of Raymond Verheijen's sort of work, I think it's you're far more likely to get a buy-in because I guess the trust is there, as you said. I think we share a lot of the same views and the mindset on things, but what I've certainly felt like this season as well, sort of, it's taken a couple of years to this, but I now feel more confident to sort of challenge him on certain things. So if he suggests something or has an idea for a training session or something, then I'll feel more confident to sort of say, okay, actually, well, this is probably a better idea, or say someone's load is quite high or something along those lines. Just be more confident to go and say, okay, right, this might be the case for so and so. I suggest we manage them in this way or something like that. So as you said, that relationship is vital, certainly the head coach, because sort of getting them on side is really useful. And it's fortunate, able to work with someone who has similar, so has similar views, similar mindsets, but not a case of, I sort of say to him, not trying to just be a yes man. So whatever he says, yeah, that sounds good. Being able to have that, being able to challenge each other at the same time, having the trust that it's, challenging each other for the sake of trying to improve things. If I suggest something and he doesn't agree with it or doesn't do it, then it's not the case of, he doesn't believe in me or anything like that. It's a case of, he just doesn't agree, and that's fine. But I think the strength of that relationship in any club, in any role, in any environment is massive, isn't it?
100%. I think it's the little things that go into that, though, isn't it? Like you say, a car journey, a discussion on mutual interests or whatever. And I always think back speaking to Mike Boyle when he said, would I go for a beer with someone? And we probably disregard things like that, but that then leads to something further down the line of you being able to challenge, being able to maybe implement something like a protocol like you've talked about, which maybe if you haven't done all those things previously, the coach isn't going to treat it the same, is it? So it's building that trust and that strength in that relationship that allows you to everyone benefit from it further down the line, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely not a case of thinking at the time, right, if I get him a cup of coffee or something, then in 6 months' time I'll be able to suggest something and he'll go, oh yeah, good idea. It's just, as you said, just letting things happen naturally, and like anything, it's just the process. That just happens over time. Like I said earlier about developing experience, developing confidence, it's developing the relationship, and developing that trust, which it might take 6 months, a year or so to build, but once it's there, as you said, everyone benefits from it, to each other, but ultimately the players in the team. Yeah,
definitely. And before we move on to some of the quick fires, I wanted to just put this to you about some career aspirations, because we're catching you relatively early on in your career. But I thought it's interesting just to get your mindset on it, because I know, like we've talked about, you've been very proactive in your networking, reaching out to people, getting into really good discussions, obviously developing your relationship with your coach and your peers at your club. But I just wanted to put on you, like, in terms of have you got any specific aspirations career-wise? Do you even think about that? Do you think about a year down the line, 5 years down the line, or is it a case of dealing with what comes up and making the most of every opportunity?
I think it's definitely more the latter, just doing things in the moment and going from there. Definitely don't have anything in terms of like a 5-10 year plan or anything like that. The only thing really is just want to work at a high level, obviously, in the professional environment. That's sort of the only thing really. Have only worked in football. Doesn't mean I only want to work in football. Would be open to trying other sports, and people talk about going overseas. Again, would be potentially open to that, certainly sort of earlier on. But there's no other sort of, like I said, very, very happy where I am now. Sort of love the club, love the group of people around us. It's a really, really good place to work. So obviously we've got a bit of like the ongoing project now, trying to get into the championship. So it's a good time to be involved and trying to just contribute to that and get the club promoted. So I guess not even really looking beyond this season. Down the line, ultimately it's just a case of working at probably a professional high level. I certainly don't have really one particular job in mind. Just see how things go and just continue being in the moment, really.
Brilliant, mate. Well, we'll go on to some of the quick fire questions now, which I'm sure you're well aware of after listening to a few episodes of the podcast. But we'll start with the first one we always ask around your biggest influences. So who are some of the sort of standouts in terms of people that have influenced you the most so far in your career?
Two big ones were when I did the year out with the year internship with the men's team. So the S&C coach, Chris Thorpe, sports scientist Nathan Beardsley, neither of whom are now, they've since moved on. But I probably couldn't have asked for two better people to work under whilst I was there. Just really good sources of knowledge, of really good people to work with. That was my first year properly working in the environment, and to learn off them. Both had their own little ways, different things they imparted, like Chris's sort of work ethic, sort of learned a lot of him, just saying, ultimately it's just working hard, that's a lot of it. So getting a lot of him in that sense. Nathan, he was quite good at sort of keeping his emotions in check regardless of what was going on. So sort of thinking, okay, that's quite an important factor, which backfired in a way. Actually, when I did then start with the women, I thought that was sort of the way to be, sort of be quite straight face, whatever's going on, and probably didn't work out too well because I wasn't being me. I was trying to act like what I thought was the right way to be as a sort of scientist or whatever. So yeah, sort of, I guess you'll be careful of how much you take off from people. But yeah, certainly those two. And then after that, it's not to say people to that extent. As I sort of mentioned, people I talk to, like, you get little bits off them, and that's sort of where it all comes together into then what I then do and what I believe in. So they sort of influence in little ways, like they mentioned something to do in training. Okay, right, we'll do that, and that becomes part of the program. So there's that, and then actually, as I already mentioned, like the head coach Andy Cook, he, I guess the way that he works, obviously, as we're working under him, obviously I need to try and mirror that, so we're all aligned. But I think he's quite good influence, and the physio as well, so working under her, again, working together to try and make sure things are aligned and to make sure they're really effective. She's been a great influence as well for me. Certainly when sort of in the early days, sort of starting out and getting things off the ground with the women.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think that point as well that you made about not being yourself is a really important one, because we can use people as influences, can't we? But at the same time, we don't want to become mini me's because eventually we do need to show our own personality, don't we? So I think that's a really, really good point. The next one, mate, what would you say is your biggest strength as a practitioner?
It's possibly sort of the rapport maybe I have with the players. I get, as like a lot of things you've mentioned already, it's, I guess, built up over time. But I think a large part of it comes down from just trying to help them, because like anything, if someone's trying to help you, you gain some respect for them, and you're more likely to build that rapport. So I guess it's just been part of the job and just trying to help them, obviously in their game in general, but getting to know them on a personal level as well. Like as I mentioned, they're part-time, so they've got uni work, they've got jobs, and some of them got really interesting things going on. So actually just chatting to them about that, you get to know them from that perspective. Like someone doing a PhD, so people at uni, like what they're doing on the course, what they're doing for their dissertation, things like that. So it can be quite easy in a way to strike up a conversation with someone. And I think just the rapport that builds, and I guess it mentioned similar to that relationship you then build with the head coach, when it comes to maybe asking something of them, because you've got that rapport, it's maybe more likely they'll buy into what you're suggesting. So I think that works well. So yeah, I'd say probably sort of the rapport again, but like a lot of things, that hasn't happened overnight. It just takes time to build that trust with them.
Yeah, brill. And then finally, mate, where do you do your learning? Because I know obviously you mentioned about the community and watching the webinars, but where else do you go in terms of learning, continually progressing what you do?
Definitely the main source is podcasts. So obviously your one, the Basic Performance podcast as well. They're definitely the main two. They're quite nice. Yeah, just sort of an afternoon, just sit down and have those on, get pen and paper to hand and listen to those. And then others, I've actually just started the Need for Speed course with artists.
Oh,
so yeah, looking forward to seeing what comes from that. There was something else. There was Steve Ingham with his supporting champions. They did some sort of practitioner courses, and I did the S&C one with Nick Grantham, which was excellent. He did a fantastic job of doing that. It was really interesting. So I guess, and then webinars that pop up, and obviously any papers as well. But certainly, I think podcasts are probably the main ones, and then obviously different things can lead off that. They're the main ones.
Brilliant, mate. Well, I think we've covered some really interesting stuff. I think it's great to dive into your journey so far. I'm sure people have taken a lot from your journey and the sort of way you've gone about it, because I think you've done some stuff that's inspiring in a short space of time. So keep the good work up, mate, because I know you're continually progressing, continually working hard to improve what you do. Do you want to just give your social media if anyone wants to sort of get in touch, any questions, things like that?
Yeah, of course. So on Twitter, I think it's at Marcus_Ward_, and Instagram it's the other way around. It's Ward_Marcus_. Happy to reach out to people like that. And obviously, if anyone is in the East Midlands area now that they're everything's opening up a bit more, if they're in around and that's going for a coffee or something, or even just text or message or something, yeah, definitely up for that.
Brilliant, mate. Well, I really appreciate your time, Marcus. Thanks for coming on, and I'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you very much, Ben. Been great. Thank you.